Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we delve into the stories, talent and creativity behind the Irish screen industry. So in this week's episode, Matthew Briody will be chatting with former Film Ireland contributor and screenwriter Stephen Shields about his impressive career. But first we catch up with Jeremy Brooker, one of the leading Magic Lantern performers working today. He is in Dublin for the wonderful Bloomsday Festival this weekend, so make sure to check out Joyce and the Magic Lantern on the 12th of June, Ulysses, A Magic Lantern Odyssey on the 14th of June, and a Volta Cine concert on Monday the 16th of June. And you can get your tickets now at bloomsdayfestival.ie. So thanks so much for chatting with us.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Gemma.
You're coming over for a very exciting festival. But first, before we get into that, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background with the Magic Lantern.
Well, I've been a Magic Lanternist for a very long time, in fact, over 50 years. I first got interested when I was a teenager and used to be able to buy these things in markets really cheaply. And I just got very, very interested and kind of started mixing with other people who like that kind of thing. And so I've been performing and collecting slides for half a century.
And what prompts the interest? Where does it come from? Where did you even first see one?
Well, I first saw one. A bit of a weird story, but my aunt had a big house in a village, and it had been like the village shop at one time. And my mother and her sister thought it'd be fun to run an antique business. They were really bad at it, but they loved going to markets and auctions and buying stuff and then putting it in the shop. But what happened in practice was they'd put all this lovely stuff in the shop, and then some dealer would come in and buy it all. And it was a bit depressing as an experience. But one of the things they did keep was this Magic Lantern. And when we were children, we just were kind of fascinated by it.
It's beautiful. I was wondering, this is an audio interview. And for anyone listening to the podcast, I was just wondering if you could just describe it to us very, very briefly. And we'll have a picture up on the website.
Well, the Magic Lantern is a very simple thing. It goes right back into the 1600s. And it's just, you have a light in a sealed box, and the light passes through a hole with lenses in it, and you put a glass picture in there. Light shines through the glass picture, and you make a big image on the screen. So it was always about being able to take a small image, or it's not small by our standards, but small by standards of the time, take it absolutely anywhere, set up and do a show. So it's not like a theatre show or somewhere where you've got to have lots of special equipment. All you need is a dark room, and you can set up and do something. And that was always the kind of secret weapon of the lantern. And it went on really right through, unbelievably. NASA were making Magic Lantern slides in the 1970s for lectures. So this idea of people talk about is pre-cinema. I mean, long pre-cinema, and well, certainly in parallel with cinema, maybe even after cinema, is kind of a parallel story rather than a before and after kind of story.
You have a beautiful example of one here on screen that unfortunately people can't see, but we'll have a really fabulous image of it. And it's 3 boxes, 3 cylindrical gold cylinders. And it does look like steampunk, this creation of mystery. A piece of art in itself.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gemma. The appearance is always a very important thing, because when you go to see a film, you don't really think much about the technology, whether it's digital or old school film. They're hidden away in a box, and that was always for kind of safety reasons, but also because they're not very visual. Magic Lantern and film projectors are not particularly visual things, whereas a Magic Lantern was always meant to sit right in the middle of the audience, so people could be amazed by it. So it was an object of wonder in its own right. And even today, when people come in to see a show, you're set up, and they come in and they want to take pictures and have a look, before you've even done anything, because it's all kind of shining metal and wood and it's designed as a spectacular piece.
And it's a piece of artwork in itself. And just what about your own enjoyment of creativity and history as well? Is there an element of that in what you're drawn to about it?
Yes, it's I think people come at this from different positions. So some people are just collectors and they collect, beautiful old slides, and that's great. But I've always been more drawn to the performance side of it. So we have to have material we're prepared to stick in the back of our car and travel to Dublin with So it's got to be, be kind of reasonably robust. But also, I've always been very interested in making slides. I mean, right back at the very beginning, I didn't have any money at all. So of necessity, I was painting slides very, very crudely. And that's that kind of creative part of it has always been almost as important to me as the kind of collecting side of it. So when we do this show, I mean, maybe a quarter of the slides are slides that I've made specially for this particular production, whereas the other ones are from all different kind of periods of history of the Magic Lantern.
So you're coming over for this brilliant Bloomsday Festival. I was just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit more about what people who maybe have booked tickets could expect.
Well, the star of the show is certainly the Magic Lantern that we're bringing with us. It's called a triple lantern, or sometimes a triunial lantern, which, as it sounds like, is 3 magic lanterns, one set on top of the other. And that was the kind of the pinnacle of what the Magic Lantern ever reached in terms of kind of sophistication. And you can create spectacular effects, and there's movement and color. It's quite a really visual show that kind of works for a modern audience. And this particular sort of lantern didn't really come in until the 1890s. And then they were in use. You look in old catalogues of Magic Lantern material up until about the First World War, they're still selling them. But so it had a really quite specific time period when it was in use, very much the time when Joyce was active. So this isn't, again, it's not pre-cinema, it's in parallel with cinema. So for that first period, 10 years or so of cinema, there wasn't such a thing as a film projector which didn't also show lantern slides. They were very much kind of parallel media. And we know that Joyce was very interested in film. You know, he ran the Volta Cinema, I think, from 1908. I think is that right? 1909, I think. But so you can see that he knew about film. He was familiar with film. But the thinking behind this show comes from a book by Keith Williams, who's also over with me for the festival and is doing 2 presentations as well. And he wrote this book called James Joyce and Cinematicity, Before and After Film, which sounds a bit daunting, but actually it's a terrific book. And what Keith's saying is Joyce was born in 1882, so he was a Victorian through certainly his childhood and sort of early adolescence. Ulysses is set in 1904. I mean, obviously it wasn't published till the 1920s, but that's the period that he had in mind. And you get things. So, for example, in the Dubliners, Evelyn, the story Evelyn from Dubliners. I think that's 1904, and it's famous because it uses narrative flashbacks to tell a story, and that seems to us very filmic, because that's just the kind of thing people do with cinema. But in terms of cinema, that wasn't really introduced until 1908. It was D.W. Griffiths. It became a kind of trademark of his filmmaking practice to show these. I suppose it's the shuffling of time and space, is how Keith puts it, which is a rather nice way of putting it. But that kind of narrative storytelling, where you're in the present but you refer to the past with visual imagery, is something that was used in Magic Lanterns from, say, the 1860s, with these life model slides, which are kind of like tableau vivant, where people set up in a situation and kind of scenes from a story, from a narrative. So you can see that although it looks like it's film, it's really Magic Lantern. And that's why Keith uses this term cinematicity, because it's not really filmed, it's not really Magic Lantern, but it's a kind of mixture of the two in a way.
And in terms of the Modern Lantern Odyssey show, what is the creative space left that people are going to arrive into?
Yes, that's a very good question. I came at Ulysses from a funny perspective, because I read Keith's book first, and we discussed this possibility of creating a kind of Magic Lantern response to Ulysses. And I've done not similar things, but I've done things like it in the past based on Dickens, William McGonagall, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I've kind of created performances based on on literature in a way. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to do, but I'd never actually read Ulysses. So when I read Ulysses, it was from the perspective of preparing for this show, and also as from a perspective as being a magic lanternist. So that was my kind of starting point. And so what I just ended up doing was taking 7 episodes from Ulysses, and but it's not in any way a kind of retelling of the story. It's responding to these 7 parts of the show. So the first one is Hades. That's where I start the show. Obviously, the novel has already been going for a while by then, but and I can make a play on this idea of ghost shows, kind of ghost stories, Phantasmagoria, which is a magic lantern entertainment based on kind of raising spirits and skeletons and things. So I can kind of play with the magic lantern ideas in the context of Joyce's kind of imagery. So that's the kind of way it works.
What is your technical process in getting that? What is it like sort of building that content, in terms of like what would be the closest in modern technology that we'd say it's like this, but you're doing all this manually and you're creating it all with like a completely different type of technology?
I mean, in a way, I find it difficult to make a direct comparison because it's not like film where it's time-based. You press start and it runs through in real time. This is a much more creative. It happens in the moment. It's a performative medium. So we've got 2 musicians and we've got an actor, and then Keith is doing a bit as well, and then we've got the 2 of us operating the magic lantern. So it's a whole kind of team, and it's kind of comes together in the moment. But to answer your question in another way, I mean, we've got kind of 2 roles. One is to try and put this reflection on Ulysses from a perhaps unfamiliar point of view, but at the same time, it's to show off the magic lantern and what the magic lantern was and what it was capable of. So each of the 7 episodes has a very different character, and in a way responds to a different aspect of the magic lantern and what its capabilities were.
In essence, it's sort of like a live, it's almost like you're creating a live theater/film based on the performance, the artwork, the immersive nature. And I wonder, is the closest thing like virtual production? So there's like technology now where you stand on a soundstage and this amazing VR world sort of comes over you and you act in the moment. And I presume all like, the edits and sound and things kind of come after, but it's allowing people into that completely curated world of creatives.
I think that's probably, that's a very good way of thinking about it. One of the musicians we worked with once said it's like editing a film in real time. I think that's quite a good way of putting it. I mean, the thing, it's, in improvisation, in music improvisation, they often talk about something fixed and something free. So you have something you've worked out, a chord sequence or whatever, you've kind of got. And then within that, you allow yourself to be creative in the moment. And I think it's a bit like that because, we can't change the sequence of slides. Once we've worked out the sequence of slides, we're working at speed in the dark. We can't even see what the slides are. We're just kind of trusting we put them in the right place, and then we put them in the lantern. And I work with my wife Carolyn, and we've kind of worked out a quite complicated choreographed thing where we can kind of work really fast. But you couldn't suddenly think, I think I'll put this one in now. It's not, so it's the sequence is set, but what happens depends a little bit on what the actor and the musicians do in the moment. So you might take longer with something, or you might do something a bit quicker, or you might kind of bounce something backwards and forwards, just because it happens a little bit like, I don't know, in playing chamber music where you've got an idea of what you're going to do, but suddenly does something interesting and you kind of find yourself doing things slightly differently than you ever had intended.
It sounds very fun to be involved with as a creative in any role as well, because it's something so immersive and so different. What would be an element of this, maybe that sort of would surprise someone completely new who's never set foot in a performance like this before?
I think we have an idea when you talk about something like Magic Lantern that it's going to be kind of like book illustrations done big, kind of still pictures, kind of very static. So I think the surprising thing is that the images are really quite big, and that there's so much movement and kind of variety, because that's not really what you expect. You don't expect it to be a kind of visual experience. You think it's just going to be looking at somebody's holiday snaps or something. It's far more kind of spectacular than that, I think.
And in terms of coming to the festival, how do you bring something like this? Are you based in the UK?
Yeah, we're in London, so we're setting off tomorrow. This a daunting journey, but it's I mean, as I say, with the Magic Lantern, that's always its secret, was that it was portable, so we can get the whole lot in the back of our Citroen Berlingo, and we got all the lantern. It comes into two parts, and we've got all our boxes of slides, and we've got our screen, and various other bits of paraphernalia, and all clothes for a week, but it will all fit in our car, which is miraculous. If you think about it, we don't use a tour bus or anything.
Well, I was thinking of the horrors of, like putting it onto like a flight and check luggage or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I have done that in the past. I don't think I'll do it again. It's too stressful. But we've been invited to do some shows in Lithuania in January, and we're just trying to think through the logistics of that. It's I don't know. I'd love to do it, but it's either it's a very, 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 very long road trip, or you have to trust everything to the airline, which is not a pretty prospect.
And in many ways, do you feel connected to the history of the art form? Do you feel like you're looking at it through a modern lens and doing something very different with it now, or would you, with your craft, try to say honor the type of work and stories that was being told in the past?
I've been sort of steeped in this stuff for so long that I kind of in that way of thinking, but there's not in any sense authentic what we do. I think the reality of Magic Lantern shows was probably very often that they were quite slow. Like you'd stick a picture on and then somebody would talk for a long time. Then you put another picture and somebody talked for a long time. Or, something that we probably wouldn't feel comfortable watching in our time. But I'm glad you referred to it as an art form, because I think it is. And I think that's kind of the key to it, is that it's essentially simple. You've got three lenses and you can put different things in each one, and they can have moving parts and that. But it is what it is. There are limits to what's possible. But I think there's that thing of limitations sometimes being more inspiring than freedoms. That sort of famous paradox. And I think with the Magic Lantern, it's amazing what you can do. And the thing I enjoy is kind of, who'd have thought you could create a show based on Ulysses using something as arcane as a magic lantern. But I think it works really well as a entertainment.
Brilliant. And while you're at the festival, are you going to go see anything else? Is there anything that takes your fancy?
Yeah, we haven't really planned it, but we've been invited to attend any of the events we want to. So we're one of my jobs for today is to have a look and see. But there are some great things. I mean, I'm involved with two things. There's a lecture with Keith Williams called Joyce and the Magic Lantern, which, if anybody's interested in knowing a little bit more about the thinking behind the show, that's the place to go. That's at 5:00 at the Joyce Centre on the 12th. Our show is on the 14th, and at Belvedere College, and then we're going home on the Sunday. But Keith's staying on and doing a presentation about the Volta Cinema on the 16th, which is Joyce's cinema, and he's recreating the kind of films that Joyce would have shown. Should be fascinating, I think.
Really fascinating. Very exciting. I look forward to it.
Oh, it's a fantastic festival. I mean, we're so grateful to be invited to take part, because it's a big project for them to take on, and it's not a film premiere or whatever. It's something different, and I hope people will appreciate that, how lucky they are to have Bloomsday Film Festival in their own community, because it's a wonderful thing. It's not replicated anywhere else, really.
And thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you very much, Gemma.
So we're delighted to welcome Irish screenwriter Stephen Shields onto the podcast to talk with Matthew Briody about the craft of writing across genres in film and television, about creating strong characters, hitting deadlines, about his 2024 American vampire horror comedy Abigail, and his profound fear of ballerinas.
You've written across so many different genres and formats. You've done cartoons, children's TV, sketch comedy, and horror. Was that because of a conscious effort on your part, or did it happen on its own?
No, it wasn't a conscious effort on my part. It's just one of those things. I think when you're in your infancy of your career, you're just trying to get paid to write. And I think the way the trajectory of my career has gone, I've been lucky enough to kind of do separate things, like work in sketch comedy, work in kids TV, and then all the way up to actually writing screenplays. I think I more wanted to do it because I was given great advice years ago to just, if you can get paid to write, do it, because you're still writing, and then that can kind of, lead on to other things. So it was kind of just not a conscious effort. Like I think like with stuff with kids TV, an opportunity arose where someone asked me, "Hey, look, we're looking for a kids TV show. Have you got any ideas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I might have an idea," which led to a few things. But no, not a conscious effort at all to write any of them. Sketch comedy, I kind of am more. I was lucky enough because of people who I knew who were working on the show, and I think I still write sketch comedy, but no conscious effort, no. Business obligations, yes. Best way of putting it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see you have the Abigail poster behind you. How long did you have the idea for a vampire ballerina before you started writing it?
Well, it's a funny story how the film kind of came about, and it kind of sounds like one of those true Hollywood myth stories, but it is true. I actually came up with the idea on the plane ride. Well, first of all, the idea was kind of gestating for a while in my head around 2018. I know I wanted to make a heist movie that kind of had a monster or something involved in it, or like a demon or something like that. So the actual idea for Abigail came on the flight to Los Angeles in 2019. I was on an 11-hour flight to LA after we premiered Hole in the Ground in Sundance. And it was just one of those things. I wrote up a one pager on the plane and said, look, if someone asks any ideas, I had a few other ones, but I have this one I really thought was cool. So the idea, the kind of, it's about a group of kidnappers. They take this girl. She turns out to be not who they think she is. They start going missing. And then there's a big reveal of what she actually was the basic premise for it. But I knew going into one of the meetings I had was with Universal, with the execs there. And I was like, oh, they have the Universal Monster Library, which I'm a massive fan of. I wonder if I can perhaps use that to my advantage. And, because Universal is the home that the monsters built, and they do love monsters at Universal. So I just kind of pitched them this version of it and added kind of tiny caveat at the end of like, oh, they could be this thing. And yeah, that's kind of how the movie kind of was. It was in my mind for about a year, but I really formatted and really constructed that plane ride over to America. Yeah, it was crazy.
And did you always know it would be a comedy horror?
No, the comedy element, like I've written comedy horror before. I did a storyline a couple of years ago with a director called Conor McMahon. And that's a comedy horror kind of a little Irish thing called Zombie Bashers we did. But for Abigail, how that kind of became more comedy horror is more down to the radio silence, Matt and Tyler, who kind of came in to direct the project. I've been writing on it for a while, over a number of years. And what happens in Hollywood is once you kind of get to a certain draft that the studio's happy with, they become open director assignments. So they send them to a few directors who they think might be interested. And obviously Matt and Tyler, a guy who came on to do some work on the script, who I've become really good friends with since then. Like I get Guy. The comedy elements just came from them guys. Like they made Ready or Not. Like Ready or Not is a very funny, very kind of action-packed, kind of in scary moments film. So they have a specific tone to make their movies. Even like Scream and Scream 6, they have really good levity moments, and like there is gore and there is suspense, but they really like to kind of use what they're good at, and what they're good at is kind of applying comedy moments to their films. So that kind of came from them, which, that didn't bother me at all, coming from a comedy background myself. I'm just like, yeah, cool. There was levity in the script before. There was moments in awareness. It's like there's jokes and moments to break the tension, but most of it, I'd say, comes from Matt and Tyler and the way they work and the way they want to make their movies. So, yeah.
It seems like throughout your career you've been mixing comedy and horror.
Yeah, well, the first thing we ever got made was Zombie Bashers. Like the first thing I ever worked on and got paid for was Zombie Bashers, and I've always liked comedy. I've always liked making people laugh. I think for me, horror and comedy, I always say this, and I may offend some people who work in drama, but I do love good dramas. But comedy and horror for me are the two biggest reactionary genres in space. I think I think giving people a good fright or giving people a good laugh is a really, you can see that when you sit in the theater, for example. You can hear the crowd laugh. You can see the crowd jump. Dramas people usually sat there stoically, like no one's watching if anyone's crying or anything like that. Them movies are still very good. But I just love Zombie Bastion, for example, and just to go back to that, it's like that was again, I knew Connor's movies, like he had made Dead Meat before that. And I was just like, hey, look, I like comedy. And the concept is kind of funny as well. It's about two plumbers turned zombie exterminators who have basically no clue what they're actually fucking doing, trying to take out zombies, which have become more pests, and they have become like really like an infectious problem. I actually still think it's a very good idea. I'd love to, like, me and Connor are always talking about development into a feature. Um, but yeah, I just love comedy. I love making people laugh. I love making people jump. I think it's why you get into movies. I think it was why I got into movies anyway.
When you worked on sketch comedy, what was the writer's room environment like for you?
For a long time when we were doing the sketches, we didn't really have a writer's room. That kind of came in later, which was a great thing. But when we did get to it, it was really good. Like we would hold like meetings in a small boardroom, and people would pitch their stuff, and it was really good because it's kind of that weird, strange thing when you're in a writer's room where you're basically again, you probably have 10 things and you're hoping at least one gets picked. You know what I mean? And then there could be that miracle thing where like, oh, six of them get picked. You're like, going, whoa, what the hell? But what's really good about it is like the riffing of like, hey, I got this idea. I'll be like, that's really good. And then people start chiming in with jokes. And it opens your mind that if you ever want to go further in your career with writing or working movies or TV, to be receptive to collaboration. This is a collaborative medium. Sometimes I think people forget that it's a collaborative medium. Like everyone is working together to make one thing. So it's a really good thing of like, yeah, like I can't find a joke for this, and you'd shout it out of the room, and someone would shoot out a number of jokes, and you'd write it down, and you go, "That's brilliant!" Yeah, because it is writing, for example, in any format is a very lonely process. So when I'm doing stuff that I'm collaborating with other people, it's nice. I like both, to be honest. I do like being on my own and writing. And then there's another part of me that likes, hey, I love being in a room with someone like, say, for example, Lee, who I made my first movie with. We'd actually have an enjoyable days, and they'd actually go very fast. But writing sketch comedy is really interesting because there's one rule I always say: if you're writing sketch comedy, just be funny, because you find out unfunny people get found out very fast. And not to say I don't think I'm funny really, um, but I know enough how to write jokes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's good. The writers' rooms are good. I actually wish they had done more of them in more jobs I'd worked in. But you need the right people in those rooms. You can't have people who are just kind of, oh, I come from RTE News, and now I think I'm really interested in doing comedy. You're like, no, I'll either be funny or don't be funny. Like you get found out very fast. But yeah, it was great. It was really good fun. It was a really good time to learn and hone like short versions of my craft. I think that's really interesting.
I always like how you write strong female characters in your scripts.
Well, for example, like Joey in Abigail was always a strong character when I wrote her. From the first draft, she was always like she was the smartest person in the room besides Abigail, because when Abigail was in the room, she was the smartest person, smartest man partner. So I like writing characters that are not. I don't like horror movies where they portray the main character as like they're not clever. Like they should be clever. People are clever. It's just they're dealing with the situation that's presented to them. I think Shauna as well in Hole in the Ground, like she's the first person that realizes like something's not right here, but it's about everyone around her doesn't believe her, and all the evidence points to that she's making it up. Um, but for example, just going back to Abigail, like all the characters are kind of clever in their own way, and they have their own strengths. Catherine's character, like, is obviously just, she's clever. She's in the computers and stuff like that. Angus is a good driver, but he's got loose wiring. But yeah, I just like writing strong characters. I find them much more interesting than people just running around trying to lock the door behind them. Pretty much plot wise the same.
Did you feel any pressure as an Irish writer writing a vampire story? Thinking about how Bram Stoker came from Dublin?
No, like it's not no, not well, like there's no pressure, for example. No, but I am very aware of the that we kind of, well, Bram Stoker did kind of didn't create vampires, but created the greatest vampire story probably ever written. But no pressure. I just think it's nice to have a connection that I'm from Dublin. I wrote a vampire movie, and Bram Stoker's from Dublin. He wrote a really good vampire book, and Alicia's from Dublin, and she played a really fucking cool vampire. That to me is just really cool. Like that's awesome stuff. But no pressure, dude. I don't believe in pressure.
As a scriptwriter, how do you manage deadlines? Do you set goals for yourself, or are the goals set by the studio?
It's yeah, it's kind of can be both sometimes. Usually, you get a deadline. If I'm working on something myself that I'm not like getting or like paid, or it's my thing, I'll give myself an artificial deadline. So I have to then. Well, for studios, yeah, you kind of get in your look, it's around this point we need the script because that machine works faster. Um, but usually what I do is like I'm about to go back into a project now that I'm about to do another draft on. Um, that there's all like a whole notes process in between that. But it's about getting into it when you're kind of ready to get into it as well. It's not like, hey, I'm just going to jump into it now. It's like Jess and all those notes, and I'm really just thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to do to go into this one. But once you get into the script and the rewriting process is very much fun. The first draft is always I find the hardest, because you're basically just filling up like the blank page. But now I'm kind of like, oh, like it's going to be Christmas soon, so I have to get it over. So yeah, deadlines, but just try and get a number of pages on a day. Would be my thing. Like I try to do at least 5 to 10. That'd be my goal. So, and in the rewriting process is a little bit easier because there's scenes you're not really going to change that much. So,
did working in sketch comedy help you with meeting deadlines?
100%. I remember working days on Republic where it would be like, Stephen, we need you to write a sketch, and we're shooting tomorrow, and we're shooting in this location. So you'd be writing nearly 5 to 6 drafts in like what my day would in the morning, have that meeting, Stephen, we need a sketch, write a version probably in about 2 hours, have the executive producer read over it, go for a bite to eat while he's doing that, come back, get notes, rewrite it again, sit with the cast and the production crew and go over it again and rewrite it. You could be there till all hours of the evening just getting it done for a shoot the next day. But it's a really great learning process of how to do something. My time in sketch comedy was well earned, but it was also a really great teaching exercise.
So would you say a lot of what you learned in sketch comedy still helps you to this day?
100%. I'm like I say to you, like in my writing process of writing screenplays, I try to at least write 5 to 10 pages a day. 10 pages I can do if everything goes to plan in that way. Well, I'd be happy if I wrote 5 pages, and I think most writers would be like, yeah, 5 pages in a day is good. 5 to 10 would be my goal. If I could write 5 pages in the morning and 5 pages after lunch, I'm happy. I would just get it on the page and then go back and rework it. But yeah, I'd be very happy with that. That was my working day to do it in practical ways. So.
I heard that you were influenced by a fear of ballerinas. Where did that fear come from?
The fear of ballerinas. You know what? I went to see a thing I dragged to a thing in the Olympia Theatre years ago, which I think was kind of bad. It was a silent play that had, I don't know why people would want to watch a silent play. It was a silent play that had ballerinas in it. I think the whole experience scared me, but the idea, the way ballerinas move, terrifies me as well. They're so graceful, and they can move with such agility and speed, and that's what I wanted for Abigail. Like the idea that she's a vampire, she probably would have been around during the kind of Bolshevik days where, she would have gone to probably see the big ballets when they were things, and she'd kind of brought that with her up until the point where the movie happens. I just think it was kind of, and I just thought it was a cool visual as well, like a fucking vampire in a tutu is scary. But to me, I do have a fear of ballet a little bit, not the actual industry. It's just I think the way they can do things that are just beyond the realm. Like they're athletes, like dancers are athletes. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. They're athletes, and the last thing you want chasing you besides a vampire is someone who's fit and graceful and can jump over things.
Even in your script, Abigail's movements are so measured that you know straight away she's the one who's in control.
Yeah, it comes out as well as I think it's one time, like when you're making a movie like this, sometimes things click. Like obviously Swan Lake starts the movie, and Swan Lake is in Dracula. Like that's how Dracula, the original 1930s, 1936 version, starts. But Swan Lake is that really interesting story about it's about transformation, and it's like one thing that you underestimate becomes something much more. And I think that's the story of Abigail. It's like she is when we first meet her, she just seems like she doesn't seem like your average girl. She's getting in a Rolls Royce or a Bentley or out of the car at the start of the movie, but it's you get the sense that she's not exactly who she says she is, and I think that kind of is all that kind of stuff links really wonderfully when you're writing something. So yeah.
And you bring so many references into the film. Like the way you have Frank saying, "Let's go kill us a vampire," which is what George Clooney says in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like it's very. Don't even when you kind of start reading it when you're writing after you're writing. Oh, I'm very referential here. Like there's a lot of stuff that's like the influence. Like I was definitely influenced by From Dusk Till Dawn. It's one of my favorite movies. Like it's definitely influenced by a lot of Tarantino stuff, like Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that, where they're not supposed to know each other's names. And there's moments where they kind of give a little bit away, hence the kind of Rat Pack stuff. Um, yeah, no, like the some of the dialogue is just it's great. And there's a lot of improvisation, like a lot of stuff that wasn't in the script. Like Dan is very good at improvising, and he comes up with like different takes of like like names for Abigail, like Angelina Ballerina. I think it was like 50 different versions of that they went through, maybe. So like it's good, but I would encourage that if I was ever directing. I think you gotta let actors work. You know what I mean? It's not like get your version that's on the script by all means. But let them play. Like that's all acting should be. It's playing. You know what I mean? Like so I would encourage people to improvise as much as possible.
As a writer, are there any scripts that you would always find yourself coming back to or that you hold in a really high esteem?
Oh, dude, yeah, like the social network script written by Aaron Sorkin is a masterpiece. Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs script is brilliant. I'm trying to think of genre wise. Matt Reeves' script for Let Me In, which is the remake Let the Right One In, is a really enjoyable screenplay to read. She's got some great Ted Tally's script for Silence of the Lambs, by far probably the greatest script ever written. Really, I'd say there's some great stuff in that. Man, all scripts are good. All good scripts. I go back to all good scripts. There's a lot of bad scripts. Everyone writes scripts differently, but I do. There's a few. I do. David Ayers for Training Day is a great script as well. There's a few I do when I remember I'm writing. I do pull up and kind of have a quick read. Well, oh yeah, if it's like a scene I think is the same in tone, I go, oh yeah, like I see how he wrote this. It's like look, we're all learning from each other. As long as we're not stealing from each other, but we're all learning from each other. So.
Are there any directors you'd really love to work with?
Oh, dude. Do you know what? There's people I would really like to like. There's two rounds. There's people who have been in the business for so long. Like, of course, like I'd love to work with Fincher. I'd love to work with Spielberg. I'd love to work with Scorsese. All the top. There's just but and then there's people who are like up and coming in a way who I'd love to work like Bryce McGuire. I think he's a really good director. He's Night Swim. Uh, I'd love to work with Lee again. That's always on the agenda. Me and Lee are always looking to do another project together. That's a given. When that happens, that happens. I love stuff like James Wan stuff. Like Lee Wanell in the horror space, but so many good directors, man. Like it'd be an honor to work with some of them, and even ones like like again, Catherine Bigelow. Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. I'd love. I think her movies are great. Kate Dolan here would be very interesting. Working with your friends is always good as well. You know what I mean? That's always a good space to be in.
Talking about Lee, I heard that you and Lee had another film planned out after A Hole in the Ground. Is that film still in the works?
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's still there, man. That script is still there. What happened with that script was Lee got Evil Dead, so we only had a time when we had written versions of it, and then he went off to Evil Dead, and then I got Abigail. So what happens when you jump onto another project is that would have probably just sit on the shelf for a few minutes, but it's still on the agenda. It really is still on the agenda. Every time we meet, we talk about it. It's about getting time together to do it because when you're collaborating on a project like that, I could go off and write that based on notes he gave, but it's such a specific script that we wrote together that it would kind of be unjustified if we didn't sit in the room and do it together. Really should do. I like that. I like sitting in a room with Lee. When we wrote Hole in the Ground, we used to sit in his apartments in town, like literally like a 1 bedroom apartment. We wrote that movie. But I think now where we're kind of advancing in our careers, I think it's only just that we sit and do this movie together. I don't think I could I don't think I'd feel right doing it not with him. Look, I think that script is still there. We have a few other things that we're talking about doing that maybe I might write on my own for him, or he might collaborate with me on in terms of writing. So yeah, it's always open. Like we're friends first and then filmmakers second. So it's always up to that point. We need to get our schedules lined up.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me about all of this.
No problem.
If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, don't forget to rate and subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to check out filmireland.ie for articles, events, news and reviews.